What if everything you thought was real suddenly turned out to be totally fake? Rolex just got caught in the most explosive, game-changing leak of 2025, and this changes absolutely everything about luxury watches. For decades, they've been selling you a carefully crafted story, a beautiful fairy tale wrapped perfectly in that shiny crown logo everyone recognizes instantly. Millions bought into the dream without asking questions, believing every word of the marketing. But someone just courageously pulled back the curtain. And what's actually hiding behind all that polish is absolutely wild beyond your imagination. Prices are crashing harder than anyone predicted. The entire market's in complete freefall. Dealers are panicking, and millions of people worldwide are seriously questioning every single dollar they ever spent on luxury timepieces. This isn't just a typical industry drama you ignore. This is a full-blown crisis that's actively rewriting the entire luxury game forever. Ready to see exactly how deep this rabbit hole actually goes? Stay tuned as we uncover the massive scandal that's making the rich and powerful sweat bullets. The Rolex mystique and Swiss-made illusion. The Rolex brand screams power, prestige, and success. Their watches have a very specific look that nobody else can copy. They're sporty and built tough, like real tool watches designed for action. Back in the 1950s, Rolex created the Submariner, a watch that could survive deep underwater. This became their signature style: active, adventurous, unstoppable. That's the Rolex DNA. For decades, people believed they were buying Swiss perfection. When you hear Swiss-made, you probably picture quiet mountain villages covered in snow, small workshops tucked away in the Alps, old craftsmen with gray hair hunched over workbenches, carefully assembling tiny gears under magnifying glasses. This beautiful story about tradition, precision, and luxury craftsmanship passed down through generations is what Rolex wants you to believe. That story isn't completely true. The Rolex you paid thousands or maybe even tens of thousands of dollars for isn't entirely Swiss. In fact, some of the most important parts of your so-called Swiss-made timepiece never even touched Swiss soil while being made. The reality is much different from the romantic fairy tale you've been sold. Rolex is holding on to their legendary Swiss-made status while playing the system to make maximum profit. And the whole time, they're counting on you, the customer, to stay completely blind to what's really happening behind the scenes. The polished advertisements show you one thing. The glossy magazine spreads tell you another story. The expensive boutiques, with their perfect lighting and velvet ropes, make it all feel exclusive and special. But the truth? The truth is hiding in plain sight, thousands of miles away from Switzerland, in places most Rolex owners have never even heard of. So where are these watches really coming from? What's actually happening in those factories? And why has Rolex worked so hard to keep you from finding out? The answers might shock you, because the real engine powering the luxury watch industry isn't where you think it is. It's in a massive, modern city that produces almost every watch you've ever seen. And it's about to blow the Swiss-made myth wide open. Shenzhen, the real manufacturing engine. While Rolex keeps pushing images of peaceful Swiss villages and traditional alpine workshops, the real story is happening thousands of miles away in Shenzhen, China. Most people have never even heard of this city's role in watchmaking, and that's exactly how luxury brands want it. Shenzhen isn't some sketchy back-alley factory town making cheap knockoffs. This place is absolutely massive. We're talking about a sprawling megacity with nearly 20 million people living there. Picture towering glass skyscrapers reaching into the sky, cutting-edge technology parks filled with the latest equipment. This is one of the most modern cities on the planet. And here's the crazy part. Shenzhen produces over 95% of the world's watches. Everything from cheap plastic digital watches to high-end luxury components ends up in fancy boutiques on Fifth Avenue or Bond Street, all made here. What makes Shenzhen so powerful isn't just how big it is, it's how insanely efficient and specialized the whole operation runs. Entire neighborhoods are dedicated to making specific watch parts with incredible precision. One district focuses only on sapphire glass. Another area specializes in polished ceramic bezels. Over there, they're making precision-cut stainless steel cases. Down the street, workers craft intricate movement components. All these suppliers, factories, and workshops work together like a perfectly synchronized machine. You can source every single part needed for even the most expensive luxury watch without ever leaving the city. Think about that for a second. Everything you need is right there in one place. Here's the part that really matters. Industry insiders know for a fact that Shenzhen plays a huge role in the global supply chain for even the most prestigious brands. Yes, that includes Rolex. It's an open secret among people who actually know the business. But the average person buying a Rolex, they have absolutely no clue. They're walking around proudly showing off their wrist, thinking they're wearing pure Swiss exclusivity. The luxury companies definitely aren't advertising it, and customers keep paying premium prices based on a story that isn't completely real. So if Shenzhen is making all these parts, how does Rolex still get away with slapping that Swiss-made label on everything? How is that even legal? Well, that's where things get really interesting. Because there's a loophole in the law. A clever little trick that lets luxury brands have it both ways. And once you understand how it works, you'll never look at that Swiss-made label the same way again. The Swiss-made legal loophole. For years, luxury brands have used the Swiss-made label to justify charging absolutely insane prices. They've built entire empires on making people think Swiss-made means the whole watch was designed, crafted, and assembled completely in Switzerland. But most consumers have no idea how disturbingly easy it is to slap that label on a product that actually owes most of its existence to factories overseas. The law governing Swiss-made doesn't mean what you probably think it means. It doesn't guarantee your entire watch was made within Switzerland's borders. Not even close. Instead, the law says that at least 60% of the watch's value needs to be attributed to Switzerland. 60%. That means almost half could come from anywhere. But here's where it gets sneaky. Value doesn't just mean the physical materials or the labor that went into making it. Value includes branding, marketing, research, and development. All those intangible things that have absolutely nothing to do with the actual watch sitting on your wrist. So luxury brands can play games with the numbers. Here's exactly how the system works. Components like the case, the dial, the bracelet, and even super intricate movement parts get mass-produced in places like Shenzhen. Then they ship everything to Switzerland. Swiss workers, often using automated machines, assemble all the pieces together. They engrave the logo. They polish the surfaces until they shine. They make final adjustments and tweaks. That final stage, even though it might be pretty minimal compared to all the manufacturing that happened in China, is enough to satisfy the legal requirements. Boom! The product now qualifies as Swiss-made. Even if nearly half of the actual physical parts were born in Chinese factories, it still gets the label. And once that Swiss-made label goes on, the price skyrockets. Sometimes it doubles. Sometimes it triples or even quadruples. It's a totally legal loophole. The reality is way simpler. When you pay thousands of dollars for a Rolex, you're mostly paying for genius marketing and a carefully built illusion. You're not purely paying for Swiss craftsmanship. You're paying for a story, a fantasy, an image that makes you feel successful and exclusive. For decades, the luxury watch industry kept this delicate illusion alive. A global supply chain hidden behind polished glass displays and billion-dollar advertising campaigns. Authorized dealers smiled and nodded. Marketing materials showed pristine workshops. Nobody asked uncomfortable questions. Everything seemed perfect. But secrets this big can't stay buried forever. In 2025, everything changed. Footage leaked online that luxury brands desperately didn't want you to see. Grainy videos revealed what was really happening inside those Chinese warehouses, and when people saw what was in those boxes, the entire industry went into panic mode. The crown was about to fall. The 2025 China leak. For years, the luxury watch industry maintained this perfect illusion, where global supply chains stayed hidden behind expensive marketing campaigns and polished boutique windows. Everyone played along, dealers never mentioned where parts actually came from, and customers never asked uncomfortable questions. Everything seemed fine on the surface. But in 2025, the bombshell dropped. Someone leaked footage online that the industry desperately wanted to keep secret. Videos that were grainy but clear enough to see everything. Massive Chinese warehouses stacked floor to ceiling with watch components, not just parts for cheap imitations either, but components destined for some of the world's most prestigious brands. Boxes were clearly labeled with names that sent absolute shockwaves through the watch community. People zoomed in on every frame, analyzing every label, trying to confirm what they were seeing, and there it was, undeniable. Among all those boxes sat components marked for Rolex, the crown jewel of Swiss watchmaking, completely exposed. The leaked videos showed everything: meticulously crafted bracelets that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, polished bezels catching the warehouse lights, the literal heart of the watch that's supposed to represent the pride of Swiss engineering, all sitting there in Chinese warehouses, ready to ship. The footage spread across the internet like wildfire, and watch forums absolutely exploded with heated arguments. Some people defended Rolex, saying this was normal business practice, while others felt completely betrayed, like they'd been lied to for years. YouTubers broke down every second of the leak frame by frame, and journalists started digging deeper, asking questions the industry didn't want to answer. Suddenly, that myth of untouchable Swiss exclusivity crumbled right in front of everyone's eyes. The polished marketing facade hiding an uncomfortable truth got ripped away, and people finally saw what insiders had known all along. The emperor had no clothes. So how did Rolex respond to this massive exposure? Absolute silence from one of the world's most powerful brands. But behind the scenes, panic mode was definitely happening. Whispers started emerging from authorized dealers about quiet instructions coming from corporate headquarters, where Rolex had secretly told dealers to cut prices on some of their most iconic models. The Submariner, that legendary dive watch, the GMT Master II, beloved by travelers and collectors, the Oyster Perpetual, a Rolex staple for decades, all of them quietly discounted by up to 20% in certain regions. There was no press release announcing these price cuts, no acknowledgement that the leak even happened, just silent damage control happening behind closed doors. Rolex hoped that by slashing prices without making noise about it, they could keep the illusion intact for people not paying close attention. But for insiders, collectors, and anyone actually following the story, the message came through loud and clear. The crown had been tarnished, the carefully constructed myth cracked wide open, and for the first time in decades, Rolex was scrambling to contain the fallout. The question now was whether the damage could be controlled, or if the entire luxury watch market was about to collapse under the weight of truth. Market collapse and consumer disillusionment. The luxury watch industry, especially Rolex, has always thrived on one absolutely critical thing: the illusion of rarity. It wasn't ever really about selling you a beautifully engineered timepiece. It was about selling you access to an exclusive club, a symbol that supposedly few others could attain. Those legendary waiting lists that stretched for years, the astronomical resale prices that sometimes doubled retail value, the boutique scarcity where authorized dealers claimed they had nothing in stock, all of it fed into this narrative that owning a Rolex made you one of the chosen few. But as the leaked footage from Shenzhen spread like wildfire across the globe in 2025, that precious illusion began crumbling in absolutely spectacular fashion. For the first time in decades, consumers couldn't ignore the uncomfortable truth staring them in the face. The luxury supply chain isn't some pristine, insulated Swiss sanctuary where master craftsmen lovingly assemble each watch by hand. It's global, it's mass-produced, and it's nowhere near as exclusive as everyone's been led to believe. The financial fallout arrived swiftly and brutally. In 2025, Swiss watch exports plummeted to their lowest levels in 20 years, excluding the unprecedented dip caused by the pandemic years earlier. And this time, there was no global shutdown to blame, no lockdowns preventing people from shopping, no economic crisis forcing spending cuts. This collapse was pure consumer disillusionment, people waking up to reality and deciding they weren't interested in paying premium prices for manufactured exclusivity anymore. Collectors who once treated Rolex watches like reliable investments, like blue-chip stocks you could wear on your wrist, suddenly got extremely nervous. Resale prices that had been climbing steadily for years began sliding downward, sometimes dramatically. Industry forums that were normally buzzing with excitement over new releases and hunting for rare models were instead filled with hushed speculation and growing anxiety. People started asking uncomfortable questions. If my watch has Chinese components, what's it really worth? Will values keep dropping? Should I sell now before things get worse? Even private dealers, those secondary market operators notorious for capitalizing on scarcity with outrageous markups, found themselves in serious trouble. Their once highly coveted inventory, pieces they'd been flipping for massive profits just months earlier, now sat unsold, gathering dust in display cases. The feeding frenzy was over, demand had evaporated almost overnight, and nobody wanted to pay inflated prices anymore when the mystique had been shattered. The luxury watch brands stayed completely silent through all of this, clinging desperately to their polished advertisements and pristine boutique window displays. They kept pretending nothing had changed, that business was continuing as usual, that the leaked footage meant nothing. But behind closed doors, absolute panic had already set in, executives scrambling to figure out damage control, dealers quietly discounting prices, the entire industry realizing their carefully constructed empire was under serious threat. While Rolex and the other giants scrambled to maintain their crumbling public image, something unexpected was happening. A new force quietly emerged from the shadows, one that the luxury brands had ignored for too long, and it was about to send even bigger shockwaves through their world. Factory-built homages disrupt the market. While Rolex and other luxury brands scrambled to control the damage from the leak, something else was quietly happening. A new player emerged from the shadows, completely rewriting the rules of watch ownership as factory-built homages, once just an underground curiosity, suddenly exploded into a massive global market. Let's be totally clear about what we're talking about here. These are not the cheap, laughable knockoffs you see at flea markets or sketchy street corners, and we're definitely not talking about flimsy counterfeits made from brittle plastic with movements that tick so loudly you can hear them across the room. Not even close. This is a completely different animal. These watches often get built in the exact same factories using the exact same machines, materials, and sometimes even the same workers as legitimate luxury watch components. The only real difference? They skip the logo, skip the branding, skip that astronomical markup that magically turns a $2,000 watch into a $10,000 status symbol. That's literally it. Industry insiders have different names for these pieces. Some call them B-grade builds, others use the term homage watches, and you might hear them called OEM unbranded pieces. Whatever name you use, the truth is undeniable. They offer nearly identical quality at a tiny fraction of the price, and luxury brands have basically zero ability to stop them. Here's what makes this movement so powerful. Thanks to encrypted messaging apps like Telegram, WeChat, and WhatsApp, collectors completely bypass traditional retailers, dealing directly with the factories. No middleman, no authorized dealer taking a cut, no fancy boutique overhead costs. Buyers can customize their pieces exactly how they want, choosing the dial color, picking the bracelet style, deciding on specific finishing details. Then they walk away with a Swiss-grade quality watch for maybe 15 or 20% of what they'd pay in an authorized Rolex boutique, sometimes even less. For Rolex and their competitors, this is an absolute nightmare scenario. The exclusivity they've so carefully protected for decades is evaporating right before their eyes. That carefully controlled scarcity that kept prices high and demand through the roof, completely gone. The waiting lists that made people feel special when they finally got their watch, now meaningless. Customers now have options, real options, high-quality, affordable alternatives that deliver the same look, same feel, same craftsmanship, and luxury giants have zero control over any of it. They can't sue the factories because technically these aren't counterfeits if there's no logo, can't stop the apps because sky-high transactions happen peer-to-peer in encrypted channels, can't control the narrative anymore. The truth is out there now, and consumers understand that the $10,000 price tag isn't about quality or craftsmanship. It's about branding, about maintaining an illusion, and once people see through that illusion, why would they keep paying premium prices? But the factory homage market is only part of the story. The real question is how luxury brands have been justifying these prices in the first place. And when you actually break down the numbers, when you see the real cost versus what they're charging, the whole game becomes crystal clear. The profit margin. Reality. For years, luxury brands have justified their sky-high prices with promises of unparalleled quality, incredible craftsmanship, and prestigious heritage. But once you actually peel back the marketing and look at the real numbers, the story becomes way more ruthless than most people realize. A story the luxury giants desperately hope you never bother to investigate. Take a standard Rolex retailing for $10,000. Industry veterans who actually know the business estimate that even with premium materials, skilled labor, and all the overhead costs, it costs somewhere between $2,500 and $4,000 to manufacture. Let that sink in for a second. The rest of that price, sometimes $6,000 or $7,000, is pure profit, wrapped up in a crown logo and sold to you under the guise of heritage and exclusivity. Other respected watch brands are actually way more transparent about their pricing. British watchmaker Christopher Ward publicly states they never charge more than 3 times their production costs, being totally upfront with customers about the markup. Omega, another giant of Swiss watchmaking, averages around 4 times markup, which is high but still reasonable compared to some others. But Rolex, they're playing in a completely different league, often exceeding 5 times markup, with certain models generating even more obscene profit margins. And it doesn't stop with Rolex either. Major luxury conglomerates like Swatch, Richemont, and LVMH all enjoy massive profits from their watch divisions, making serious money year after year. But compared to Rolex, even these giant corporations look almost modest in their pricing. Even tech giants like Apple, with its 32% profit margins, or Microsoft hovering around 38%, fall short when you factor in Rolex's quiet, secretive financial structure. Behind the polished glass displays of Rolex boutiques and those glossy magazine advertisements lies a highly optimized, vertically integrated profit machine. Rolex owns basically everything in their supply chain: the gold foundries that produce the raw materials, the movement manufacturers that create the watch engines, the polishing workshops that give everything that premium shine, the final assembly lines where it all comes together. Every single link in the chain is tightly controlled, designed to maximize efficiency while keeping costs down and profits astronomical. This vertical integration means Rolex doesn't have to pay other companies for components or services, keeping even more money in-house. They control quality, sure, but more importantly, they control costs and margins at every single stage. It's ruthlessly efficient and stunningly profitable, all built on the back of consumers who genuinely believe they're paying for exclusivity and superior craftsmanship. Reality is way simpler than fantasy. When you pay thousands for a Rolex, you're not just paying for Swiss craftsmanship or premium materials, you're paying for marketing genius, for a carefully crafted illusion that's been perfected over decades. You're paying for the privilege of wearing that crown logo, for the status symbol it represents, for the story you get to tell yourself and others. But here's where things get really interesting. Luxury brands have always relied on one critical psychological factor to justify these insane markups: the absolute confidence that your watch is real, authentic, and verifiable. But what happens when that confidence starts to crack? When fakes become so good that even experts struggle to tell the difference? When the line between real and fake becomes completely invisible? The authenticity crisis. Fakes have existed in every luxury industry for decades. From handbags to sneakers to jewelry, counterfeits are nothing new. But when it comes to watches, especially Rolex, the stakes have always been way higher, and the game has completely changed in recent years. A $50 counterfeit from a street vendor is obvious, cheap, and fools absolutely nobody. The materials feel completely wrong, the movement ticks loudly like a cheap alarm clock, and experienced collectors can spot it from across the room without even touching it. These crude fakes never posed a real threat to the luxury market because they were so obviously fake that nobody with any knowledge would ever mistake them for the real thing. But today, the line between real and fake isn't just blurred anymore, it's practically invisible. Factory-built homages have become so incredibly well-crafted, so precise in their materials and construction, that even seasoned watch enthusiasts sometimes struggle to tell the difference without specialized equipment. Same weight distribution, same finishing quality, same smooth gliding movement of the second hand that Rolex is famous for, everything matches. These modern alternatives use the same grade of stainless steel, the same quality sapphire crystal for the glass, the same type of ceramic for the bezels. The movements inside, while not necessarily identical to Rolex's proprietary calibers, often perform just as well and keep time just as accurately. Put a genuine Rolex and a top-tier homage side by side, and unless you're using specialized tools or opening up the case back, you might not be able to tell which is which. It's no longer just about craftsmanship or quality anymore, it's become completely about psychology. Rolex has built its entire empire on the confidence their watches instill in the wearer, that quiet swagger you carry when you know you're wearing something real, valuable, and prestigious. When you wear a genuine Rolex, you carry this assurance that nobody can question your success, your taste, your authenticity, because you know what's on your wrist is the real deal. But wear a homage, even a perfect one that nobody else can distinguish from the real thing, and suddenly that confidence evaporates. The lingering doubt eats away at you constantly, that nagging voice in the back of your mind whispering questions. Will they notice something's off? Will someone call me out? Am I fooling anyone or just fooling myself? The psychological burden becomes almost unbearable for some people. The luxury brands know this psychological gap exists, and honestly, they completely depend on it. For many Rolex buyers, especially those paying full retail price, they're not just buying a watch anymore. They're buying peace of mind, buying the absolute certainty that what they're wearing is authentic and valuable. They're paying thousands extra just to eliminate that doubt, to sleep soundly, knowing nobody can ever question their watch's legitimacy. And as factory-built alternatives continue to rise in quality and availability, Rolex's grip on the market depends less and less on actual quality differences, and more on exploiting your fear of being caught with an imitation. But there's something else people don't know about Rolex, something that completely contradicts the image they project to the world, and it's hiding in plain sight behind a charitable foundation. Behind the non-profit facade. Rolex likes to present itself as something different from other profit-hungry luxury empires, somehow more noble and principled than the competition. On paper, they operate under the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, a private non-profit entity founded by Rolex's original creator back in the day. Sounds charitable, almost wholesome, like a family business protecting traditional values instead of chasing profits. But peel back that carefully constructed facade, and the reality is as ruthless as it gets. Rolex remains one of the most powerful, secretive, and insanely profitable brands in the entire world. And they do it all without answering to shareholders or revealing public financial disclosures. Unlike publicly traded companies that have to report earnings and justify their decisions to investors, Rolex operates in almost complete secrecy. Industry estimates suggest Rolex produces over 1 million watches every single year, generating billions upon billions in revenue. Think about that scale for a second. Over 1 million watches annually, each one selling for thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. The money flowing through this operation is absolutely staggering, yet nobody outside the inner circle knows the exact numbers because they don't have to tell anyone. Their vertical integration is nearly total and completely ruthless in its efficiency. They own the gold foundries that produce the precious metals, the movement manufacturers that create the mechanical hearts of their watches, the polishing workshops that give everything that signature Rolex shine, the final assembly lines where everything comes together. Every single link in the supply chain is tightly controlled, designed to maximize efficiency, maintain absolute secrecy, and generate massive profit margins. Here's the really clever part. Thanks to their nonprofit foundation status, Rolex enjoys tax advantages that most companies can only dream about. Regular corporations pay substantial taxes on their profits, money that goes to governments and gets redistributed through public services. But Rolex, operating under a foundation structure, legally minimizes these tax obligations while raking in profits that would make most Fortune 500 companies jealous. Meanwhile, they carefully maintain this illusion of being a philanthropic, tradition-driven institution that cares more about heritage than profit. The polished advertisements show artisans carefully assembling watches. The pristine boutiques create an atmosphere of exclusive luxury. The noble foundation structure suggests charitable intentions. It's all theater, carefully orchestrated to make you feel good about spending enormous amounts of money. Behind that curtain operates a corporate behemoth running with ruthless precision and singular focus on profit maximization. Every decision, every strategy, every carefully controlled piece of marketing is designed to extract maximum value from customers while revealing minimum information about actual operations. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. The luxury watch industry, with Rolex leading the charge, thrives on perception rather than perfection. It's built on exclusivity and scarcity, on carefully constructed mythology that makes people feel special for spending money they often can't afford. And now, after everything that's leaked, after all the secrets that have spilled out, the question becomes whether this house of cards can keep standing or if the entire empire is about to come crashing down. If this new revelation changed how you think about luxury watches, let us know in the comments. Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss our next deep dive into the hidden dynamics of wealth, status, and the brands desperately trying to capture both. Because in luxury, nothing is permanent.